if you feel having your camera on, we love to see your faces and have it a bit more interactive. So if people are comfortable doing that, we encourage it. So let's get going. So this webinar is going to touch upon sort of two aspects. So for the first one, I'm going to be talking about what is available through the CDP, some of the data visualizations we offer, and how you can access them. And then the bulk of the presentation will be led by Saide and Jamie, who will be giving a demonstration on how to access CDP data from the catalog, open it up using Beyond 2020, and then actually bring it into Tableau to create data visualizations. And so they'll be leading sort of the second half of the presentation, and we'll be going kind of more in depth around data access and visualization. So what is the value of data visualization? So of course, at the CDP, we're familiar with large data tables, and we know how complicated and complex it can be to work with data. But data visualization is a tool that allows a user to transform data into something more palatable and more into a story that allows a reader to easily identify trends and quickly interpret the data. And it's also a tool for bringing greater access to data to people who might not be as comfortable working with Excel or really complex data tables. So part of the CDP's programming is facilitating access to data through data visualizations and infographics. So we use a software called Tableau, which is a data visualization tool that allows for really complex tables to be brought in and interacted with in a way that makes them more accessible to an end user. And so a lot of what we do is bringing these tables in, and a user is able to quickly choose a geography for any community in Canada and have an infographic automatically generated in the software without even having to open up Excel or Beyond 2020. So it's perfect for someone who has limited capacity to work with data. And Tableau offers sort of two tools for opening up data. So that's Tableau Reader and Tableau Public, and I'll quickly touch on those in a couple slides. So I'm not sure how many are familiar with sort of CDP's website, but we do have a range of different Tableau products that a user can go in and download through the website. So all of these infographics are made available through the CDP data and visualization portal. So you can, if you have your membership, which you all, if you're sitting here today, you all do, you're able to go in and download a range of different Tableau products, which you can have on your computer and just quickly interact with as a way to access data without having to go into Excel or Beyond 2020. And so just some examples of what we have as part of the Tableau suite on the Community Data Program website. So many of you may be familiar with the Community Recovery Dashboard. So this dashboard contains a wealth of information related to labor, employment, number of other different variables, sort of around the theme of COVID-19 and recovery from the pandemic. Some other products that are more recent, the Mobility in and out of Local Immigration Partnership Dashboard. So this looks at movement of people in and out of sort of local immigration partnership geographies using the IMBD table data. We also have the Community Health Profile Dashboard, which is another newer dashboard that's available through the CDP that offers a couple of variables from the Community Health, Canadian Community Health Survey. So those are related to smoking, access to healthcare provider, and prevalence of heart disease. And so again, this particularly, some of these data sets are quite complicated to work with. And so these dashboards allow user to quickly go in and access data. And so this workshop will hopefully provide some foundation for all of you to be able to go in and actually start creating your own visualization so you can share those infographics with your networks. Before I hand it over to Saide, I just wanted to touch upon a couple of the Tableau products that we work with. So I mentioned Tableau Reader. So Tableau Reader functions similar to Adobe PDF Reader. And so what that means is you can download any of the products that we have, and Tableau Reader is a free sort of software that basically allows you to open it up on your computer, and you can, use the filters and flip through. And it's just a very simple software that you can use to interact with all the dashboards. If you have a little bit more comfortability with Tableau and creating data visualizations, there's a Tableau Public Desktop, which is another free software. And it has a lot of the same sort of analysis capacity as the paid version of Tableau, but the caveat is that files cannot be saved locally on your computer and instead get uploaded to a public server. So if you want to sort of manipulate data without having to worry about purchasing a subscription to Tableau, Tableau Public Desktop is a really good route if you do want to use Tableau and do some of your own analysis. So that was sort of the quick intro to some of the tools that we use and what we offer at CDP. If there's not any questions, I'm going to pass it over to Jamie, who's going to walk you through using community data products and how to open them up in Tableau.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm just going to share my screen because I'll be doing a bit of screen sharing of different programs and I'll be jumping around a bit. Okay, so my presentation is on using community data program data in Tableau. So if you've worked with Tableau before, you probably know that the first step of any project is the data prep stage. And this part can be quite time consuming, and it's very important to ensuring the rest of the project goes smoothly, figuring out how to work with the data sets you have available and making the best use of them and getting the data you need so that the rest is easy. And so that's what I'm going to be showing you today, is how to get through this data prep stage, but using specifically census data from the community data program. So if you've been around the CDP catalog, you probably know that most of the data is in IVT format, which does not have very wide compatibility. It can basically only be opened in beyond 2020 software. Tableau cannot directly read an IVT table. So this means if we want to use data from an IVT table in Tableau, we have to extract from it. But luckily we can extract from beyond 2020 as a CSV file, which is a format we can work with in Tableau, either bringing directly into Tableau or doing edits on it in Excel or Tableau Prep, and then from there we can import it into Tableau. So the exact process for data prep will always be a little bit different depending on the data you're working with and the needs of the project. So there's not one set of steps you can always follow every time, but in this presentation I'll try to explain some of the concepts and the steps that I generally follow that'll help you be able to do this yourself and bring data from our catalog and into Tableau and build dashboards from it. And I'll be doing a mix of showing these slides and doing some live demonstrations in Beyond 2020 and Tableau. So of course, the first step is actually acquiring the data. So you can do this through the CDP catalog. And if you haven't done that before, you can access it just by clicking the Find Data button at the top of any page on the website. And that'll bring you to our catalog. And at the top, there's 6 different filters that you can use to search for data sets. I won't go into each of these, but basically topics lets you search by a topic. Product group is if you know what you want 2016 census data, for example, or target group profiles. Those are some examples of product groups. Product title is good if you want to search by a keyword like tenure or collective dwelling or something. And geographies lets you filter down, so you're only viewing tables for the geographies that you need for your project, and same goes for years. And so if you found a table that looks like what you need, you can click on it and that'll bring you to the page, to this page, which will look like the one on the right in this image here. And if there's a description, it'll be there, as well as notes. And the most important thing on this page generally is the dimensions. So this will list the different dimensions contained in the IVT table. And if you click on those, then it'll show you exactly which variables are contained in those dimensions. And so that way you can tell exactly what data is in a dashboard before you download it. And so if it is what you're looking for, you just select the geographies you need from this little menu here. You click add to cart, follow the steps, and then you download it. So once you have an IVT table and you want to export data from it and bring it into Tableau, the big challenge is being able to preserve the multi-dimensionality of these tables. So the big kind of feature of Beyond 2020 is that it lets you work with tables with several dimensions, often more than two, like 4 or 5 or 6 often. And each of these generally contain different variables that let you see how different variables intersect with each other, and it lets you really dig into the data. But for me, it was a challenge to figure out how I could capture all this detail in the data in a single export. So the most obvious way to extract data for me was that I figured out was just to have 2 dimensions. So you have a table like the one in the image here that would generally have geographies as the rows, and then you would pick one of the dimensions to be the variables as the columns, and then you would export that. And then in Tableau, you could work with these variables and these geographies, but it doesn't really capture nearly all the detail that's in these tables. So it is actually possible to capture many or all combinations of dimensions and all that detail in a single export. So that's what I'm going to be showing you how to do now. So one concept that's pretty helpful to understand for if you want to understand this process and how to set up a table is the idea of horizontal versus vertical table structures. And it may not be, it's a little hard to explain and it may not click right away, but if you stick with it, and I'll try to do some demonstrations that'll make it clear, hopefully it'll start to reveal itself to you. So this image on the right here and that table I just showed you in the previous slide, these would be examples of horizontal table structures. So in these, the numerical data is stored in multiple columns, and each of these columns represents a variable. And then since we're looking at census data here, the rows would be geographies. So if you're looking for a specific value, like say a geography 3, and you want to see variable 2 with that geography, you're kind of looking for the intersection between these two, between those two values. But if we want to be able to work with more dimensions without having tables that become really wide and difficult to work with in Tableau, then we have to switch to a vertical table structure. And so this image here is showing the same data as this first image, but in a vertical structure instead of horizontal. So this means that instead of each variable being its own column and data being stored across multiple columns, there is one column containing numerical data and then one column containing the variable values. And so each row in this table represents essentially a single variable, but each one being a combination of variables. And these columns containing the variable names called dimensions. And so there's a row in this table for each possible combination of dimensions. And so this means if you're looking for a value in this table, instead of looking for the intersection between two, like the intersection point between a variable and a geography, you're now looking for a specific row. So if you're looking for geography 3 variable 2, then you would just find the row that has geography 3 as the geography value, and then variable 2 as the variable value. And you can filter, and this lets you set up filters to get at the data you want. And filtering is kind of it's sort of how Tableau works and how it lets you access different parts of data sets. So this format is preferable for working in Tableau. It's generally faster and cleaner to work with, and also it lets you include more dimensions than just 2. So as you can see, you can add on more dimensions, and then it'll do the same thing. There'll be a row for every possible combination of the variables in these dimensions. So rather than just for geography 1 cycling through the 3 variables, this one has another dimension, so it goes geography 1, variable 1, and then cycles through variable ABC, and geography 2, variable 2, and then variable ABC, and so on. And then you can add a third dimension and it does the same thing. So again, finding the right value. So finding a value that you're looking for is just a matter of finding the right row and filtering each of these down to the row that we need. And one thing to note is the more dimensions you add, the more rows there will be in an export and the larger the file size will be. So file size is kind of the big limitation when you're trying to determine how many dimensions and variables you can fit into a table. And so that limitation will kind of be a function of how much your computer can work with in terms of hard drive space and power, and also how much you're trying to include. But generally it's something that is not too big an issue and we can work around, and you can always reduce the number of dimensions or reduce the number of variables in a dimension to get the file size down to a manageable level. So now we'll be showing how these vertical tables actually look in Beyond 2020. So in Beyond 2020, you can basically drag and drop these different dimensions around to arrange the table how you want it. So this means you can just drag these dimensions next to each other, and that will set up a vertical table, just like I explained, just like I showed in the previous slide. And I'll give you a little screen sharing demonstration of this, which will hopefully make it clearer. So a few things to note. There's always going to be one dimension on the x-axis representing the rows. So you can either put something there that you don't need to include in the export, or just have a couple of columns of data, and that's generally not a problem. And so once you have it set up how you want it, you can save it as a CSV. And sometimes exporting can take a long time from Beyond 2020, but if you stick with it, it will generally work. I've never actually had it crash on me. Sometimes it looks like it is, but then it pulls through in the end. So a couple other things to note: if there's a dimension that you haven't included in the table, then you can use these arrows to cycle through the values, and it'll sort of act as a filter on the table. So in this screenshot here, it's showing it's filtered the table down using the type of dwelling filter to only show counts of single detached households instead of showing counts of total households. And you can also remove variables that you don't need from an export, and that'll help you reduce the file size. So if you didn't need this average household size, you could remove that. That'll help you. That'll whittle down the file size a little bit. So now I'm going to switch to Beyond 2020 to show you how you would actually set up a table like this. So this is that same table from those screenshots, and this is what it looks like just as you open it up in Beyond 2020. So let's say we want only provinces and Canada for our geographies, just so we can keep the file size nice and small. And I'll show you kind of what it looks like when I actually set up a table in Beyond 2020. So we can filter to just show Canada by right-clicking it and clicking show, and then using the search button there. That's kind of how you filter values in Beyond 2020. So we want to expand the selection to include provinces. So you can do that using the level, which is level of geography. And if we expand that to include provinces and hit OK, then it'll add the provinces, all the rows with the PR for the level of geography to the filter. And so let's say we want to include household size, type of dwelling, and tenure in this table. What we need to do is just drag these dimensions next to the geography dimension, and then will build that vertical table for us. So before it had just rows for each geography, and now for each geography, it has a row for each possible tenure. And then if I drag type of dwelling there too, then for each of those tenures within each geography, it'll cycle through each type of dwelling. And this is creating a table that will have a row for basically every possible combination of values in these dimensions. So we don't need to include condominium status in the export, so I'll put that on the x-axis, and I can just choose to only show the total there. And then I can put household size there. So now it's built a table for us with all the numerical values in one column and a row for every possible combo of these dimension values. So this is basically ready to export. So to do that, you just click File, Save As, and you select CSV. We'll call it Example Table, and export that. And now we'll just switch to show you what that actually looks like, a table that we exported. So this is the table we just exported. So as you can see, there's now a row capturing all the detail from those dimensions. And so now any combination of dimensions we want to get at from that IVT table, we now have access to if we bring this into Tableau. And it'll just be a matter of filtering each of these columns down to different values to get at those numbers. So let me just switch back to the slideshow now. So often after I've exported from beyond 2020, there's more editing and processing that needs to be done on the tables. And generally I do that in Tableau Prep Builder. This lets you do kind of bulk edits on tables and set up flows, which are basically like a series of steps that will be a series of edits that will be performed on the table, and then it'll output a new version with all these changes made to it. And it lets you work with tables that are too large for Excel, because Excel has a limit of about 1 million rows, and sometimes you can get over that if you're building these vertical tables. So I'm not going to go too much into detail on Tableau Prep, just in the interest of time, and because it's not always, you don't always need to use Tableau Prep in the data prep process. I just often do. So it lets you do things like renaming columns and variables. You can pivot columns into rows or vice versa. You can perform calculations on data that is stored as columns, like adding or subtracting or calculating percentages. You can join tables together based on common values in rows. An example of a join I often do is if I have one table that has a bunch of data, but for the geography row or geography column only has UIDs in it, and then I have another table that has geography UIDs and their corresponding names, and I can join those up, and then I'll have in the original table with the data, I'll also have geography names in addition to UIDs. You can also union tables, which is kind of like joining, but instead of joining by common row values, you're sort of stacking them on top of each other by columns that they have in common. So one example of a union I often do is if I have two tables that have the exact same dimensions and variables, but they cover different sets of geographies, I can union them, and then I'll have one table that covers all the geographies from both tables. And in Tableau Prep, you can export as a Tableau data extract, which is Tableau's own special format for working with data in Tableau. And generally, if you convert to an extract, it's a little faster and the file size is a little smaller. So I do recommend doing that if you've got a big file that's slow when you're working with it as a CSV. And also you can do a lot of these edits directly in Tableau Desktop, but the difference with Prep is that it will directly edit the table. So it'll output a new table with all the changes made to it. Whereas if you do it in Tableau Desktop, it will make the changes within that project, but it won't actually change the underlying data itself. So if you bring it into a different project, it'll be back in its initial state. So now I'll talk about what happens when you bring one of these tables into Tableau. What do you do and how can you work with it? So the columns that in the table we created with variable names in Tableau will be recognized as dimensions. And then the numerical data columns will be recognized as measures. And you can see them in this little section here where the dimensions and measures are shown. And dimensions can be used to filter down, can be dragged into this filter area. And then using those filters, we can get at different variables that we want to view. And then by bringing in the measure, which is where the numerical data is, we can actually create charts that display the numbers for the variables we selected through the filters. And you can also use these dimensions as sort of axes. You can drag them to be rows or columns in, for example, a bar chart. So in this screenshot here, the household size filter has been dragged into the rows section. So it's created a bar chart where it's showing households by number of rows or by household size. And then another thing you can do is using filters is you can create menus that users can interact with when they're viewing the dashboard to control the data that's displayed in a chart. So for example, this is a tenure filter menu. And so a user can select to view households by household size for just owner households or renter households or all households. So I'm going to do a little share now of a little screen share of Tableau and just show you what it looks like when you bring this data into Tableau and how you might set up a chart like that. So this is what Tableau looks like when you just open it up and create a new project. So you'll have to connect it to that table that you've created. So there it is. And then first thing I like to do is check the field section here and make sure that it's recognized the correct type for each of those columns, which are called fields in Tableau. And it looks like they're right. The dimensions are all text, and then the numerical value is recognized as numerical data. And then here you can clean it up a bit by editing the names, for example. So we use the total from the condominium status dimension, but the condominium status is not really relevant anymore since we didn't include those. So we could just rename that to total households. And this one was cut off, so we could rename that to structural type of dwelling, for example. And then from this page, you can also convert it to an extract, which I won't do right now, just to save time, but you just click that button and then choose a place to save the extract on your computer, and then you will have it will convert that to an extract, which can be a little faster to work with. And also will help reduce the file size if you're exporting as a packaged workbook at the end. So if you're actually building a chart with this data, what you would start by doing is selecting, basically dragging each of these dimensions to the filter section here, and then filtering them down to get at the data that you want. So we start with geography, and if we want to view data for Canada, we would select Canada, and then household size. Let's say we want to create a bar chart that shows households by household size. We could select these different household sizes, and then when we drag that to the rows, it will show just the ones that we selected in the filter. And then structural type of dwelling, we can just show total, which will be just total households, and then tenure, we can select total households again. So those won't really be included, but those are still available if you want to get at the data from them. And then you just drag the total households to the column section, and that's where the numerical values are stored. So then it'll build that bar chart for you. And if you want to include labels, you can drag the measure to the label section, and then it'll show the values. So that just shows you how you can kind of easily, using filters and just dragging things around, create charts with these multi-dimensional vertically structured tables. You can go further if you want. For example, if we change the tenure filter to show owner and renter households and then drag that here, And then now it's showing the split of owner and renter households by household size in Canada. And then one other thing I'll show you is if you want to add in interactivity to the dashboard, and for example, let a user select which geography they're viewing data for, you just right click one of the filters and click show filter, and that'll let the user select the filter values. So they can choose which geography they're viewing data for, and you can change it to a different types of menus, like a drop-down menu like this, and that'll let them select the data. And this is just like one small segment of all the things you can do with these multi-dimensional tables, but it shows you how once you set the table up properly and you've captured all these dimensions, then it opens up lots of possibilities for how you want to display the data and getting at the different data in these tables. And it makes it really easy to interact with the data. It's always usually just a matter of dragging the dimensions around, changing the filter values, and you can create all kinds of different charts. So that is all I'm going to cover in my presentation today. So thank you for listening, and let me know if you have any comments about any of that. And if, as always, in the future, if you have questions about if you're trying to work with CDP data in Tableau as well, you can always email me or email us at information@communitydata.ca.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Yeah, Jamie is an excellent Tableau resource. I've certainly learned a lot from him working with Tableau. So I do encourage you all to reach out to him if you do have any questions that come up either now or in the future when working through Tableau. If there's not any questions, I'll pass it over to Saide, who's going to present a little bit more in depth about using Tableau to create data visualizations.
Okay. If you have any question during the presentation, please put it in the chat box. So hello, everyone. I am Saida Hijazi. I've been working with Community Data Program team as a data analyst for over 1 year, working with Tableau to prepare data, clean the data, and also design and develop several dashboards and storyboards using Tableau Desktop. In this presentation, I want to show you the steps of creating and designing a simple interactive dashboard and a storyboard in Tableau Desktop. So the first step of creating any visualization is defining the purpose of your visualization before extracting your data from the different sources. So my dashboard presents the population of Canada in 2016 by in different geographies, in province territories, census division, and census subdivisions. And I want to create the dashboard with charts and maps. So the next step is getting your data. So as Jamie explained how to get your data from CDP catalog. So you can get the population of Canada in 2016 from the CDP website, as explained, and I downloaded the Beyond 2020 IVT format and added to the Excel spreadsheet and separated in different geographies in different tabs for province and territories, CD and CSDs. But unfortunately, we don't have time to show you the cleaning steps, so I just skip that and go to the spatial file. So for creating maps, I get the spatial data from a Statistics Canada website, and I put the link here is the 2016 census boundary files. And There in the page, there are different options you can choose. The format you want. I want the ArcGIS shapefile, SHP. And for boundary files, there are two options, the cartographic boundary and digital boundary. Cartographic boundary portray the boundaries of standard geographic areas with the shoreline around Canada. But the digital boundary shows the boundaries used for census data collection and often extend on straight lines into bodies of water. So you can see the differences in the image on the right. So I decided to choose the cartographic boundary file. And for the geographic, I use the census subdivision, which is the smallest geography that contains the province, territories, and census division as well. So I downloaded this data, and then I have to create my data source. I have to connect to the non-spatial and spatial file, and then create my dashboard. So now I want to switch to the Tableau to show you the steps of connecting the data source live. So this is the first page, and on the connect panel, there is to a file. So first I want to connect to an Excel file. So I select the population data I have. Then I want to add the spatial file, which I add here, and select a spatial file from an add a connection panel and choose the zipped folder. So there is a kind of the tip here. So when you want to connect to a spatial file for Esri shape files, you have to include the different files in a zipped folder, SHP, SHX, DBF, and PRJL files. So I added these two data here, and I want to set up my data source by connecting the data together. And one of the ways to connect the data is called relationships. Relationships are a dynamic, flexible way to combine the data from multiple tables for analysis. A relationship describes how two tables relate to each other based on common fields, but it's not joined. It doesn't merge the tables together. So here, for example, I have the population in census subdivision, and then the spatial file, and then common field, as you can see in the in this area, is the census subdivision unique identifier. And the same for different geographies. The geography unique identifier are the common fields. So now I set up my data source. I can create my sheets and dashboards afterward. So here, this is the dashboard I created. First, I want to show you how to create a simple worksheet like this one. So you can see the icon here is a new worksheet. So I create a new sheet here, and on the left side, there is a data pane that contains it shows my data source and tables. I have the spatial and non-spatial files. In this example, I want to work with province and territories data. As Jamie explained, there is a dimension and measures, the qualitative, the dimensions, the names, the geography, and quantitative data, which is the population, numbers. And on the right side, we have the view, we have the filters, shelves, we have columns, rows, and marks card. So I will show you the different, the usage of each shelves and cards. So here I drag the province name to the rows. And as you can see, I have Canada here by mistake, so I want to filter it. I hold the Control key and drag the province name to the filter shelf and deselect the Canada. And you can see I apply. So the Canada is no longer in the list. The next one is total population. So I drag the total population into the columns shows. And you can see that the chart is created. And by default, Tableau aggregate the measure. So you can see that it's the sum total population. One of the great things for visualization is a marks card. So you can use it to, change the color, add labels, add tooltip. So for example, I want to have different colors based on the number of populations. So I hold the control key and drag the population to the color. And you can see the Ontario with the highest population have the darkest color. And also for the label, I again hold the control key and drag the population to the label, and the number of population will show up on the chart. So this is a simple chart in Tableau desktop. And the next step is creating the maps. That's creating the map sheet. So it's like something like what I've created. So again, I click to create a new worksheet. And now we work with the spatial file I have. I have the dimensions, the unique identifier, name, type of the geographies, and geometry. Geometry field is a measure here. So it's good to understand how Tableau interprets your spatial data. So when you connect to your spatial data, Tableau reads the spatial reference information of the data set and transforms the data into latitude and longitude coordinates. All data, regardless of the spatial reference system, is transformed to WGS84. The geometry field is a measure, and when I just drag it to the view, is just added as a collect aggregation. So you can see I have one polygon, but I want break it up to the census subdivisions. For this matter, I have to drag the census subdivision unique identifier to the detail in the marks card. And as a result, you can see just break it up into the different census subdivisions. For the next step, as you can see in my map sheet, when you hover over each census subdivision, you can see more information about that CSD, the province name, the census subdivision is located, the population, the CD, and more information. So for this, I use the tooltip in the marks card. So in the tooltip, you can add more information about your area or charts, so you don't have to add all of them on the sheet. And that's a great tool for showing more information. So, and also I should mention about the filter, that I will talk more about that in the creating the dashboards, but we can add the filters here, so we can focus on specific areas, not whole Canada. We can focus on the specific province or census division. So I will talk more about that in the creating the dashboards. So the next step for creating a dashboard, you can see on the right side of the worksheet, there is a new dashboard. So to create a new dashboard, on the dashboard panel, we have the size. You can choose which size you want. For the dashboard, we have the sheets and the objects. So when you add your sheets to the to the page, you can use objects like horizontal or vertical objects to better organize your sheets, resize it easier. So the blue one, as you can see, just showed up. This is our object, and I put the 2 sheets, for example, to this object. And also you can add text, image, everything to your dashboard. So there is a good option in dashboards that you can add interactivity to the dashboard. As I talked about the filters, I already created the filter for the map sheet. So I can add it to this dashboard by click to more options, filters, and add the census division name and province name filters to the dashboard. So when you, for example, click to British Columbia, it shows that area. And if you notice, this filter applies to the charts on the right and also the bubble chart on the bottom of the map. And this is possible with the more option here. And when there is an option says apply to worksheet and selected worksheet. So I selected the CD chart and CSD bubble chart. So the filter will apply to both of them. Also here on the next filter, you can choose the census division, one of the census divisions of the British Columbia. So it goes to that area and shows all the census subdivision of this location. Another useful interactivity that we can add to dashboards called highlights actions. So how this works? This is the map I have, and this is the bubble chart I have. So when I select one of the census subdivision, if you notice to the bubble chart, it highlighted it on the bubble chart. And reverse, I use the escape key to deactivate the highlight action. And then when I select on dot, it just highlighted it on the map. So this option is here in the dashboards on the above menu. There is actions, and there is add action. You can add filter, highlights, and here I have the highlights. I want to show you the different parts of this action. So this is the name, and then the source sheet and the target sheet. I use the bubble chart and the map for both. And I have target highlighting. The selected field is census subdivision unique identifier. And for the run action on select, it means that when I select that this action, the highlight action will be activated. So this is a great tool to add interactivity to the dashboards. Okay, so the next step is that the last part, which is the storyboard. There are lots of buttons here, so I have to work with. So this is the storyboard. A story is a collection of sheets arranged in a sequence. So each individual sheet in a story called a story point. So you can see here, I have 3 story points. And on the left side, on the story panel, I can add blank or duplicate story points. And also I have here my dashboards and sheets. I can add it to the, drag it to the story point and the size of my story. And you can, here you can write the name of your story points. I have the first one is the province and territory, population of Canada. And the next one is all geographies I have. And the last one, I added the resources I used, the link to the Statistics Canada website, or links to the Tableau website that has more information about the different parts of the Tableau desktop. So I will share my presentation again. So I added the screenshots to the this presentation, so you can use it if for more information. And yeah, this is my last part about the stories. And I have to, yeah. So that's it. Yeah, thank you so much for joining, and feel free to ask your questions. I would be happy to answer that if I can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saide. Maybe if we want to, stop screen sharing, bring it back to the main group. If anyone has any questions for either Saide or Jamie, we're happy to answer them now. As Saide said, that we'll be posting all this material to the Community Data Program website. So if you saw something and you want to remember how to do it, you can access all those materials after the session. The webinar will also be available too. So if you wanted to reference either the demonstrations again, that will all be made available through our website.